Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed JonBenét Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
John and Patsy Ramsey of a crime.
These are the two major motives. Either you sexually molested her or you slapped.
And just this week, plans for a new DNA investigation.
Investigators say they are exploring new DNA testing
that could point a path to the killer or killers.
In an early year interview with CNN, John Ramsey pointed to 3 unusual pieces of evidence from the crime scene as proof that an outsider, a mysterious intruder, was responsible for JonBenét's death. These items were, according to him, a backpack containing unidentified rope, an unidentified palm print, and a hair that he described as a hair from private area, maybe from the intruder. In his narrative, each of these details seemed to build the outline of a faceless predator, someone who crept into the Ramsey home, waited in the shadows, and left behind traces of their presence. Together with earlier intruder theories, John's version painted the image of a hidden stalker, a figure lurking under beds, moving silently through bedrooms, leaving only fragments of their existence behind. But here's the irony. Instead of strengthening the intruder theory, these very same pieces of evidence raise deeper questions and end up casting suspicion back on John's version of events. Who did that backpack really belong to? Was the palm print truly left by a killer, or by someone already inside the house? And was that hair ever linked to an outsider, or did it reveal something far more uncomfortable about the Ramseys themselves? In the January 25 CNN interview, John Ramsey described a backpack left in a bedroom that did not belong to his family, stating, "There was a backpack that was left in the bedroom, same bedroom that was not ours. There was a rope left in one of the bedrooms that wasn't ours." He emphasized that he only became aware of this backpack through crime scene photos and asserted it was not theirs, implying it served as evidence of an intruder's presence. From the 2001 documentary, Who Killed the Pageant Queen, produced by Michael Tracy, investigator Lou Smith commented on the rope found in the room, saying, "Also in this room there was a rope, and we don't know where that rope came from. No one can explain why that rope is in this room." Smith speculated that this rope, combined with details like a dust ruffle that appeared pulled out from under the bed, indicated an intruder might have hidden there, using the spot as a perfect vantage point to observe the adjacent room. The item in question was actually a rucksack, a specialized backpack containing a length of rope, discovered in the bedroom belonging to John Andrew, John Ramsey's adult son from a previous marriage, located right next to the relevant area. This distinction corrects earlier descriptions, such as Smith's reference to it as a sack of rope, when it was more accurately a rucksack with rope in it. In interviews conducted in 1997 and 1998, John Ramsey addressed the room and its contents, noting, "It's John Andrew's room. There are some clothes piled on the chair, which isn't unusual. Maybe it's a backpack that's referring to that. Doesn't seem to be particularly fussed about it. I don't recognize it." He acknowledged the space as John Andrew's and did not express significant concern over the rucksack's presence, suggesting it could belong to his son. Patsy Ramsey, when questioned about items stored in that room, responded, "I know he had some of his things, some college at the house, but I really can't tell you where they were or what it was," confirming that John Andrew kept personal belongings, including college-related items, at the residence without specifying exact locations. Additionally, when asked about footwear or similar gear, Patsy remarked, "John Andrew, you know he hiked," highlighting his interest in outdoor activities like hiking. Further details about John Andrew reveal he flew to Atlanta on December 19, 1996, just before the holiday period, but as a student at the University of Colorado in Boulder, he likely left personal items at his father's home for convenience. His known enthusiasm for hiking and camping aligns with the rucksack and rope, as such equipment is common for those pursuits, particularly in Boulder, a region renowned for outdoor recreation. Prosecutor Michael Cain, involved in the grand jury proceedings, affirmed that the rucksack belonged to John Andrew, describing him as a backpacker who engaged in activities requiring such gear. The housekeeper for the family believed a blanket associated with the scene originated from the dryer, implying household items could easily become intermixed, which supports the idea that the rucksack and rope were simply domestic belongings rather than foreign objects. If John Ramsey claims the backpack and rope were not theirs and only noticed them in crime scene photos, why did he not spot the rucksack during his time in that very room on the morning of December 26, 1996? He recounted being pulled aside to sit in John Andrew's room, adjacent to the key area, where Officer Linda Arndt instructed him on handling a potential call from kidnappers. As he stated, "Oh well, I remember they took me aside, and we sat in John Andrew's room, which is the one next to John B., and Linda Arndt went through what I should do when we talked to the caller." With the rucksack reportedly on a chair amid piled clothes, How could he overlook an item he later deemed suspicious and unfamiliar? This raises questions about the consistency of his recognition of household contents. Moreover, if the rucksack truly belonged to an intruder, why would such a person leave behind a personal item like that without any accompanying traces, such as DNA or fingerprints, to confirm an outsider's involvement? The argument that the rucksack and rope point to an intruder falters when considering the lack of additional physical evidence from any unknown individual. If an intruder carried and abandoned this gear, what explains the absence of other indicators, like foreign footprints or tool marks, that would typically accompany such an entry? Labeling this as the work of a forgetful intruder underscores the improbability, as it suggests someone meticulous enough to navigate a home undetected yet careless in leaving identifiable possessions. Instead, the rucksack and rope logically fit as possessions of John Andrew, given their placement in his dedicated room and compatibility with his documented hobbies of hiking and camping, which often involve ropes for securing tents or packs. Why would an intruder select that specific room to stash gear, especially one so closely tied to family members' routines? Smith's theory that the rope evidenced hiding under the bed, based on the displaced dust ruffle, lacks supporting material evidence, as no unfamiliar fingerprints, hairs, or fibers were linked to that scenario to bolster the intruder hypothesis. Delving deeper, the rucksack's context as a hiking aligns seamlessly with John Andrew's lifestyle, making its presence in his room far from anomalous. If the item were truly alien to the household, why did initial family statements in 1997-1998 reflect familiarity with the room's clutter, including potential backpacks, without alarm? Patsy's confirmation of stored college items and hiking references further erodes the notion of foreign origin. How does one reconcile John Ramsey's later insistence on the backpack's unfamiliarity with his earlier nonchalance about the bag in the room? The prosecutor's assessment by Michael Caine reinforces this, pinpointing John Andrew as the owner due to his backpacking habits, which would naturally include ropes for practical use in outdoor settings. Without corroborating intruder markers, the rucksack appears as an ordinary household artifact misplaced or stored routinely. This pattern of interpreting everyday items as intruder evidence invites scrutiny of the claim's foundations. If the rope was indeed part of an intruder's toolkit, why no matching fibers or residues connected it to other scene elements, such as bindings or entry points? The housekeeper's observation about intermixed laundry items suggests a more mundane explanation: household belongings shifting through normal use. John Andrew's proximity to Boulder and his university attendance make it reasonable for him to leave gear behind after visits, especially post his December 19 flight. Why portray the rucksack as mysterious when family interviews from the late 1990s indicate awareness of his stored possessions? Smith's vantage point speculation, while imaginative, rests on unverified assumptions about the dust ruffle's disturbance, absent any direct linkage to an outsider. The discrepancies extend to the morning interactions, where John Ramsey's presence in the room with Linda Arndt for strategic discussions should have afforded him a clear view of the chair and its contents. If the rucksack was conspicuous enough to feature in crime scene photos, how did it escape notice during that critical time? This casts doubt on the later narrative of discovery via images alone. The rucksack's design for rugged activities matches John Andrew's profile, rendering the intruder attribution strained. Without extrinsic evidence like unknown DNA on the rope, the items remain tied to internal family dynamics rather than external intrusion. Back to the January 2025 CNN interview, John Ramsey also pointed to a palm print as lingering evidence of mystery, stating, "They found an unidentified palm print that's never been tied to anybody. It was on the little door leading to that room." He presented this mark as one that remained unexplained, implying it could point to an outside presence without any resolution over the years. This assertion builds on a long history of discussions around the print, which was first documented during the initial crime scene processing in late December 1996. Investigators noted the palm print on the interior side of the door to the wine cellar, a small, seldom-used space in the basement where access was limited. The door itself was part of a cluttered area, and the print appeared in a position consistent with someone pushing or leaning against it, though no immediate matches were made from the household's known fingerprints at the time. Early forensic teams lifted the print using standard dusting and tape methods, cataloging it among dozens of other latent marks found throughout the residence, including on walls, doors, and furniture. The process involved comparing it to elimination prints from family members and first responders, but initial database searches through local and federal systems yielded no hits, leading to its classification as unidentified in preliminary reports shared with the district attorney's office. By mid-1997, the palm print underwent more detailed analysis at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation lab, where technicians enhanced the image using chemical treatments like nunhydrin to reveal ridge details that might have been faint or partial. This step confirmed it was a full palm impression, not just a fingertip or smudge, increasing its potential evidentiary value. However, comparisons to the Ramseys' immediate family, John, Patsy, and Burke, ruled them out, as did checks against police officers and friends who had been in the home that morning. The print's location on the wine cellar door sparked speculation in internal memos about whether it could relate to the sequence of events, perhaps from someone opening or closing the door during the night. Media leaks in 1997 and 1998 amplified the story, with some outlets reporting it as a key clue potentially left by an intruder, fueling public theories. Lou Smith, an investigator hired by the district attorney in 1997, included the print in his intruder hypothesis during presentations to the grand jury in 1998, arguing it didn't match anyone in the family and could indicate an unknown person hiding or accessing the basement. Smith's notes described the door as dusty and rarely touched, suggesting the print was fresh, though forensic experts later debated the age of latent prints, noting they could persist for months on untreated surfaces. The turning point came in August 2002, when Boulder police announced the print had been matched after expanded comparisons. According to reports in the Tampa Bay Times on August 24, 2002, investigators determined the palm print belonged to Melinda Ramsey, John's adult daughter from his first marriage. Melinda, then in her late 20s, had provided elimination prints earlier in the investigation, but initial scans missed the match due to the print's partial nature or database limitations. Enhanced digital imaging and manual ridge count of the identification, confirming it was her left palm. The Washington Post reported on August 23, 2002, that unidentified palm prints and footprints near the body were made by relatives, not an intruder, with the wine cellar door print specifically attributed to Melinda. She was in Georgia at the time of the incident, visiting family for the holidays, so the print likely dated from a prior visit, perhaps weeks or months earlier, when she helped with household tasks or storage in the basement. This explanation aligned with family statements about occasional use of the wine cellar for overflow items like holiday decorations, where Melinda might have handled the door. Contemporary coverage in the Los Angeles Times on August 24, 2002, echoed this, noting the prints were unrelated to the slaying and stemmed from normal family activity. The Chicago Tribune added that the palm print on the door leading to the wine cellar was from Melinda, emphasizing her absence during the events and ruling out any direct connection. These revelations came amid broader updates from the Boulder police, who were re-examining old evidence with new technology, including better fingerprint databases. The North County Times on August 25, 2002, covered the story in a broader context of forensic clarifications, quoting sources that the identification eliminated another supposed mystery. Despite this clarity, Ramsey's 2025 claim that the palm print remains unidentified and never tied to anybody suggests a disconnect from the established record. Publicly available for over 22 years, the information linking the print to Melinda is easily accessible. As simple as a Google search for JonBenét palm print would reveal. Why would someone so invested in the case overlook or misrepresent such a well-documented fact? The 2002 reports, grounded in police briefings and forensic analysis, leave little room for ambiguity. Yet Ramsey's narrative revives the print's mystery to support the notion of an unknown outsider. This raises the question: is he unaware of these findings, or does he selectively emphasize uncertainty to maintain a specific storyline? The argument that the palm print points to an intruder falters under scrutiny. If an intruder left such a distinct mark on a critical entry point like the wine cellar door, why are there no accompanying traces, such as fingerprints, DNA, or fibers, corroborating an outsider's presence? The absence of additional foreign evidence undermines the intruder hypothesis, especially when family members, including those absent like Melinda and John Andrew, left identifiable traces throughout the home. For instance, items like a rucksack and rope, also cited by Ramsey as suspicious, were later tied to John Andrew, and a hair sample initially thought to be from a private area was linked Patsy Ramsey or her maternal lineage. This pattern suggests that evidence Ramsey labels as unidentified consistently traces back to family, not strangers. How does one reconcile the claim of an intruder's mark with the reality that all notable evidence aligns with household members? Ramsey's portrayal of the palm print as unresolved is particularly striking given its public resolution in 2002. The identification of Melinda's print was not a minor detail buried in obscure files but a widely reported development, covered by multiple outlets and accessible in media archives. If the goal is to leverage forensic evidence to find answers, why present a solved piece of evidence as an open question? The 2002 articles explicitly stated the print's irrelevance to the slaying, yet Ramsey's 2025 narrative revives it as a potential lead. This discrepancy implies either a lack of awareness or a deliberate choice to frame the print as mysterious. aligning with a broader pattern where he emphasizes evidence that appears to support an external perpetrator while sidestepping clarifications that point inward. The palm print's identification as Melinda's carries significant weight in dismantling the intruder theory. Since she was not at the residence during the critical time, her print's presence likely stems from routine interactions with the home, such as opening the cellar door during a prior visit. This mundane explanation contrasts sharply with Ramsey's suggestion of an intruder's mark. If an intruder navigated the home to commit a crime, why would they leave a single palm print on a door without other signs, like tool marks or foreign DNA, to indicate forced entry or presence? The print's familial origin aligns with other evidence, like the rucksack in Andrew's room or fibers matching Patsy's clothing, all of which tie back to the household rather than an outsider. Why, then, does Ramsey continue to highlight the print as unconnected when its connection to Melinda has been clear for decades? This misrepresentation extends to the broader context of Ramsey's advocacy. His 2025 interviews, including those tied to a Fox Nation series and CrimeCon appearances, emphasize new DNA technologies like whole genome sequencing to revisit evidence. Yet, the palm print requires no such re-examination, as its source was conclusively determined in 2002. By calling it never tied to anybody, Ramsey risks undermining his credibility on forensic matters. Could this be an oversight, or does it reflect a strategic choice to maintain ambiguity around evidence that fails to support the intruder narrative? The print's resolution was not a recent development, but a fact established when he was actively involved in media discussions, making the continued mischaracterization notable. In his January 2025 CNN interview, John Ramsey highlighted a hair sample as a key piece of evidence, stating, "We have an unidentified private area hair that was found in the blanket that was wrapped around Jan. That's perhaps the most important piece of evidence we have." He expressed optimism that advanced DNA testing, including genealogy research, could yield a breakthrough from this sample, positioning it as a beacon of hope for resolution. By September 2025, in discussions tied to the Gilgo Beach ruling allowing whole genome sequencing on degraded DNA, Ramsey reiterated this focus during appearances on News Nation and at CrimeCon in Denver, claiming, "I learned recently that yes, you can get this data from hair samples. There's a private area hair sample in John's blanket." He advocated for applying this technology to several unidentified hair samples from the scene, suggesting it could finally identify a perpetrator and emphasizing his belief that implementation would solve the mystery. Yet, this enthusiasm contrasts sharply with historical actions, raising questions about the depth of his commitment to pursuing DNA evidence. The hair in question first surfaced in early 1997 reports from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, described as a potential private area hair discovered on a white blanket. Initial microscopic evaluation noted its high degree of buckling and curl, distinguishing it from typical chest or scalp hairs. By February 1998, briefings from CBI and Cellmark scientists suggested it might not be from a private area at all but possibly an auxiliary hair from the chest or underarm. That June, the sample was forwarded to the FBI for sophisticated mitochondrial DNA analysis, but testing stalled because the FBI refused to allow Ramsey's team presence in the lab. This delay allowed the narrative of an identified private area hair to persist in media discussions, often implying an external source without conclusive proof. Further complicating matters, by 2000, only one advanced mitochondrial test remained viable, but it would destroy the remaining sample. Detectives suspected the hair belonged to a family member, yet Ramsey's attorneys objected to the destructive procedure at that stage, insisting it occur only after matching a suspect to other crime elements. This stance effectively halted progress, despite the potential to tie the hair's origin definitively. Why would someone eager for answers impose conditions that prevent testing, especially when portraying the sample as critical? Such decisions suggest a selective interest in DNA pursuits, prioritizing control over expedited resolution. Years later, insights from Detective James Kohler, who accessed files in 2005 and published Foreign Faction in 2012, revealed the testing had occurred between 1998 and 2005. The results indicated the hair was not from a male contributor, but a female, classified as an auxiliary hair rather than one from a private area, originating from the underarm, back, or chest. Mitochondrial DNA analysis could not exclude Patsy Ramsey as the source, potentially linking it to her or her maternal lineage. This finding undercut earlier speculations, like those from investigator Lou Smith in 2002, who described it as likely male and a strong lead if matched via new procedures. If Ramsey truly prioritized DNA evidence, why does he continue referencing it as a private area hair in 2025 interviews, ignoring or disputing these outcomes? This pattern of selective engagement with DNA testing becomes evident when contrasting past obstructions with current advocacy. In the late 1990s, Ramsey's team resisted FBI protocols and destructive tests, effectively waiving the unidentified hair as proof of an outsider while avoiding results that might point inward. Now, in 2025 he meets with Boulder police to push for retesting using genetic genealogy and whole genome sequencing, inspired by cases like Gilgo Beach where degraded DNA yielded profiles. He speaks of nightmares haunting him and a firm belief that these methods will crack the case, yet he omits the 2012 revelations that the hair likely traces to familial sources. How can one claim unwavering faith in DNA while seemingly unaware of or dismissive toward prior forensic conclusions that challenge preferred narratives? Moreover, recent developments in September 2025, including items from the scene being retested by Colorado labs, align with Ramsey's calls for advanced analysis on unidentified male DNA found elsewhere, such as on clothing. At CrimeCon, family representatives expressed hope that emerging science could unlock clues, echoing Ramsey's optimism. However, his persistent labeling of the hair as from a private area, even in Fox Nation discussions, overlooks the auxiliary classification and female origin detailed in Kohler's work. This discrepancy implies a reluctance to fully embrace DNA findings that don't support an external intruder hypothesis, prioritizing of events over comprehensive evidence review. The housekeeper's belief that the blanket came from the dryer further contextualizes the hair's likely innocent transfer within the household, rather than from an unknown male. If Ramsey's interest in DNA were as profound as stated, one might expect acknowledgement of such details in his advocacy. Instead, his 2025 statements focus on untapped potential in hair samples, including this one, without addressing why earlier resistance delayed clarity. In a News Nation interview, he tied the Gilgo ruling to his case, asserting a high probability of resolution through genome sequencing by labs like Astria Forensics. Yet, this push comes decades after opportunities were deferred, suggesting DNA serves more as a rhetorical tool than a consistently pursued avenue. Even in light of mitochondrial results excluding him personally but implicating maternal lines, Ramsey's narrative evolves minimally. Early exclusions noted only him among family members, with initial suspicions toward others like Melinda, yet he rarely integrates these into public discourse. His recent emphasis on nightmares and haunting thoughts underscores emotional investment, but the historical record of objections to testing paints a picture of guarded rather than fervent pursuit. Why advocate so vocally now for technologies that could have been explored sooner without imposed barriers? Additional fiber evidence, such as red and black strands on duct tape matching Patsy's attire, complements the hair's internal linkage, yet Ramsey's DNA focus remains selective. In 2025 updates including a Fox Nation series granting access to investigative processes like surveillance and lab testing, he positions he is poised to close the loop. This proactive image belays past inertia, where the hair's narrative shifted from potential male private area sample to female auxiliary, without altering his overarching claims. Ultimately, the insistence on DNA's promise in recent months, amid retesting announcements, highlights a renewed but inconsistent zeal. Ramsey's meetings with authorities and media spots amplify calls for genealogy methods on samples like this hair, yet they sidestep the 2012 confirmation of its probable familial origin. If the goal is truth through science, why not confront all forensic layers, rather than emphasizing only those aligning with hope for an external match? Overall, John Ramsey's handling of key evidence reveals a consistent pattern of selective misrepresentation, where he repeatedly frames resolved items as unresolved mysteries to bolster an external intruder narrative. This approach involves emphasizing ambiguity in public statements, even when forensic conclusions from decades ago contradict his claims. This tactic creates a veneer of ongoing enigma, suggesting investigative failures rather than internal explanations. The model of deception here is not outright fabrication but strategic omission. By omitting settled forensic matches, he sustains doubt and redirects scrutiny away from household dynamics. Such portrayals often surface in media appearances tied to anniversaries or new documentaries, where he positions himself as a tireless advocate for advanced testing like genetic genealogy, yet his narratives recycle outdated uncertainties without acknowledging resolutions. This selective recall forms a rhetorical loop, reinforcing the idea of external culpability while evading implications of domestic involvement. So, in the end, what he tried to lie for, from the evidence already mentioned, we can link it back to other famous pieces of evidence in this case, and form a pattern of creating a series of evidence to divert the investigation towards many different subjects but unable to reach any conclusion. Let's also look at what evidence John has created. Beside the backpack, another item that fits this mold is the suitcase found in the basement, positioned directly beneath a broken window, containing a blanket and notebook, also belonging to John Andrew Ramsey. This suitcase, an old hard-shell model, was discovered during the initial crime scene walkthrough on December 26, 1996, by Fleet White, a family friend who had come over that morning. White later recounted in his police interview that he moved the suitcase slightly while searching the basement for clues, noting it felt heavy, but not inspecting its contents at the time. He described it as out of place, blocking access to the window, which had a shard of glass missing from an earlier break-in that John himself had admitted to causing months prior when he forgot his keys. The positioning suggested to some investigators that it could have been used as a step stool for someone entering or exiting through the window, but White's handling of it revealed no fresh fingerprints or disturbances that would indicate recent use by an outsider. Inside the suitcase, police later cataloged a folded blanket, similar in style to the one found covered JonBenét but distinct in its Dr. Seuss-themed comforter pattern, which was confirmed as belonging to John Andrew from his college days. Alongside it was a personal notebook filled with his writings and sketches, items that John Andrew himself verified as his during a 1997 interview, explaining he had left them at the house during visits from his university in Colorado. John Ramsey, in his own statements to detectives that year, acknowledged the suitcase as potentially John Andrew's, but claimed he didn't recall seeing it in that exact spot under the window, implying it had been moved there by someone else. This detail became central to Lou Smith's intruder theory in 1997, where he argued in reports and grand jury testimony that an intruder could have used the suitcase to boost themselves out the window after the act, pointing to scuff marks on the wall below as evidence of a struggle or exit. Smith even demonstrated this in a video reconstruction for the district attorney, climbing through the window himself to show feasibility. Though critics noted the marks could have been from prior household activity, like moving Christmas decorations stored in the basement, John's access to these items is undeniable, as John Andrews stored belongings in his designated bedroom upstairs, a space John frequently entered, including on the morning of the discovery, when he sat there with Officer Linda Arndt to discuss handling a kidnapper's call. In a 1998 deposition, John admitted to organizing the basement sporadically, moving boxes and old luggage around for storage, which would have given him an easy opportunity to relocate the suitcase from John Andrews' room to the window sill area. Patsy Ramsey, in her interviews, vaguely recalled John Andrews' items scattered throughout the house, but couldn't pinpoint the suitcase's usual location, adding to the ambiguity. This placement could serve dual purposes in diverting attention first, toward an intruder theory, by suggesting an entry or exit point, as Smith championed, complete with the broken glass that John had never repaired despite promising to do so. Second, it subtly implicates John Andrew himself, whose alibi was solid, he was in Atlanta, but whose personal effects in the suitcase might raise fleeting suspicions of his involvement, especially given early rumors about sibling dynamics or family secrets. The suitcase's contents further complicate the narrative, as the blanket inside bore no foreign DNA or fibers linking to an unknown person, only traces consistent with household use, per forensic from 1997. John Andrew confirmed in statements that he used the suitcase for travel and storage during breaks from school, often packing books and linens, which aligns with its discovery but raises questions about why it ended up empty of value yet filled with identifiable items if not deliberately staged. John's 2000 book, The Death of Innocence, references the suitcase briefly as part of the intruder evidence, echoing Smith's view without addressing its ownership, which by then was public knowledge. This selective recounting persists in John's 2025 interviews, where he alludes to basement anomalies without specifying the suitcase, maintaining a veil of mystery. If John could access and position his son's belongings as he wished, why place them in a spot that invites scrutiny on both an imaginary intruder and his own family member? The lack of disturbance around the window, no footprints in the dust, intact spiderwebs noted by investigators, undermines the exit theory, suggesting instead a calculated arrangement to multiply investigative paths without leading to clarity. Similar to John Andrew Ramsey, the Maglite flashlight and the Swiss Army knife stand out as items that subtly point suspicion toward Burke, while their placement and context suggest a deliberate effort to muddy the waters. The flashlight of Burke, a heavy-duty black Maglite model, typically kept in a kitchen drawer, was found conspicuously on the kitchen counter during the initial search of the home. Its size and weight made it a plausible blunt instrument for causing a head injury. John himself acknowledged owning the flashlight in his 1997 police interview, claiming it was a gift from his son John Andrew, but he couldn't explain why it was out in plain view that morning, far from its usual spot. Patsy, in her statements, vaguely recalled seeing it, but denied handling it recently, adding to the ambiguity. This positioning could imply it was used impulsively in a moment of chaos, perhaps by a child unfamiliar with its consequences, drawing Ike's known curiosity with household tools. The Swiss Army knife, a red multi-tool engraved with Burke's name, tells an even more intriguing story of misdirection. Housekeeper Linda Hoffman-Pugh, who worked for the family for over a year, revealed in her 1997 interview that she had confiscated the knife from Burke months earlier due to his dangerous habit of whittling wood and play with it unsupervised, once even leaving wood shavings around the house. Fearing an accident, She hid it in a high cupboard in the upstairs linen closet near the children's rooms, a spot she believed was secure and out of reach. According to Hoffman Poog's testimony, she informed only Patsy of the hiding place, as Patsy had expressed concern about Burke's fascination with knives and asked her to keep an eye on it. Yet, the knife mysteriously reappeared in the basement wine cellar, mere feet from where JonBenét was discovered, during the crime scene processing. Detectives noted its presence in photos and reports, with no fingerprints or DNA linking it to an outsider. But its multi-blade design matches the tool that could have cut the nylon cord used in the device. John, in his depositions, denied knowledge of the knife's whereabouts, insisting it wasn't something he handled, while Burke, in his child psychologist interview, casually admitted to owning such a knife but claimed he rarely used it downstairs. This relocation of the knife raises profound questions about orchestration. If only Patsy knew where Hoffman Poog had stashed it, how did it end up in the basement unless retrieved intentionally? The housekeeper emphasized in her grand jury testimony that she never moved it after hiding it, and no one else in the household was told. This points to Patsy as the likely retriever, perhaps under duress or direction, to incorporate the knife into the scene. John, with his authoritative role in the family, could have instructed Patsy to fetch it as part of a hasty cover-up plan, using Burke's own item to subtly shift blame toward the boy while maintaining deniability. Such a move would explain why the knife, devoid of any intruder traces, appeared in a critical area. It served to create a narrative of accidental involvement by a sibling, diverting from adult culpability. Patsy's emotional state that morning, as described by friends, showed signs of distress that could stem from complicity in this setup, her knowledge of the hiding spot making her the key link. The flashlight complements this, its unexplained presence on the counter suggesting it was left out after use, perhaps in a panic. John's later book dismissed it as insignificant, but forensic recreation showed it could deliver a fatal blow without breaking skin, aligning with theories of an unintended strike. If John directed Patsy to position these items, it resolves inconsistencies like why family tools were scattered in incriminating ways yet no valuables were taken. Burke's interviews revealed his interest in gadgets, but he denied touching the flashlight that night, leaving the adults to account for its migration. This duo of evidence, the flashlight's heft implying force beyond a child's control, the knife's personalization tying back to Burke, crafts a layered diversion, where suspicion flickers toward the boy without solid proof, allowing John to steer the story away from deeper scrutiny. Hoffman Poog's account, detailed in her book, underscores the knife's history, noting Patsy's worry over Burke's habits, which John minimized in public. By leveraging Patsy's exclusive knowledge, John could have coordinated a facade that protected the family's image, explaining the erratic placement of household objects that baffled investigators for years. Move to another evidence where we can see more clearly the role of Patsy Ramsey. It's the ransom note. A 3-page handwritten missive discovered on the spiral staircase that morning stands as a cornerstone of this misdirection, subtly implicating Patsy as the author while suggesting John's guiding hand in its composition. Penned on paper from a notepad kept in the kitchen drawer, a pad that bore Patsy's shopping lists and notes, the letter demanded 118,000, an oddly specific sum matching John's recent Christmas bonus, and was riddled with dramatic phrasing lifted from movies like Dirty Harry and Speed, such as, "Don't try to grow a brain," and references to a small foreign faction. Patsy claimed to have found it while descending the stairs to make coffee, spreading it out on the steps before alerting John, but her immediate recognition of its contents without fully reading it raised early eyebrows among detectives. In her 1997 police interview, Patsy described spotting the note and reading only the first line, "Mr. Ramsey," before panicking, yet she quoted phrases from deeper in the text during calls to friends, hinting at prior familiarity. John, upon seeing it, reportedly scanned the pages and instructed Patsy not to touch it further, though fingerprints later showed handling by both. This dynamic fuels theories that John dictated the content to Patsy, leveraging her journalism background and flair for dramatic writing, evident in her pageant speeches and holiday letters, to craft a narrative of kidnapping that would shield the true events. Handwriting analysis quickly zeroed in on Patsy, with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's experts in 1997 concluding that while John was definitively ruled out as the writer, Patsy's samples showed striking similarities in letter formation, spacing, and quirks like the lowercase, alternating between printed and cursive styles, mirroring the note's inconsistencies. She provided 5 separate handwriting samples over multiple sessions, including one with her non-dominant left hand, a request not extended to others, as investigators sought to match disguised elements in the note, such as slanted letters and exaggerated loops that suggested an attempt to alter natural script. Sina Wong, a forensic document examiner hired by the tabloids in 1997, later testified that out of 100 points of comparison, 73 matched Patsy's writing, including unique habits like the sharp, or stems, and the way she crossed her T's high on the stem. The notes of her 370 words was atypical for genuine ransom demands, which are usually concise to avoid detection, and its polite, almost nurturing tone in phrases like, "I advise you to be rested," contrasted with the threats, blending masculine assertiveness with feminine hedging, as an AI analysis in 2024 noted 7 traits of each gender, suggesting a collaborative effort. John, with his business acumen and familiarity with thrillers, he owned books on criminology, could have recited key lines for Patsy to transcribe, explaining the movie-inspired verbiage that Patsy, a former Miss West Virginia with a degree in journalism, might have embellished with her personal flourishes. The housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pooh, added fuel in her 1997 grand jury testimony, claiming to recognize the handwriting as Patsy's from notes left around the house, and noting the notepad's usual spot in the kitchen where Patsy jotted reminders. This internal sourcing, the pen also matched one from the home, undermines any outsider claim, as no intruder would linger to compose such a verbose document on site, risking discovery. John's role in this staging emerges in his 1998 deposition, where he admitted reading thrillers and discussing security, potentially providing the template for the note's pseudo-professional tone, like warnings about countermeasures and tactics. If John orchestrated the dictation, it accounts for the note's hybrid style, his strategic input for the demands and threats, Patsy's emotional inflections in the softer advice. Detectives like Steve Thomas in his 2000 book accused Patsy outright, citing the inconclusive yet damning CBI report that used, may have written, for legal caution, but internally flagged high probabilities. The note's placement on the stairs Patsy used daily further personalizes it as if tailored to her routine, and John's quick dismissal of its authenticity in later interviews, calling it too long and rambling, belays his potential involvement in shaping it to appear amateurish yet detailed. This collaborative creation would explain why the note references intimate details like John's good Southern common sense, a phrase echoing Patsy's affectionate teasing in family letters, blended with John's business jargon. In a 2016 documentary, handwriting expert Bart Baggett reinforced the match, noting over 200 similarities in stroke pressure and slant, suggesting Patsy wrote under stress, perhaps from dictation to avoid her full natural flow. John's calm demeanor that morning, as officers noted, contrasted with Patsy's hysteria, possibly indicating he oversaw the process to ensure it diverted blame outward while subtly ensnaring her in the forensics. The absence of fingerprints on the note, wiped clean except for partials, hints at careful handling post-writing, a step John might have insisted on. Ultimately, this note's intricacies point to Patsy's hand guided by John's voice, crafting a diversion that entangled her in suspicion without direct accusation. Leave the Ramsey family, let's take a look at the theory of intruder. The open basement windows further exemplify this tactic, positioned to suggest an intruder's entry point, while their condition tells a story of internal manipulation. One window in particular, in the train room adjacent to the wine cellar, was found with a broken pane and slightly ajar, a shard of glass on the floor below, as documented in crime scene photos from December 26, 1996. John admitted in his first police interview that had broken that same window months earlier, during a summer incident when he locked himself out, crawling through to enter the house, but claimed he never repaired it, leaving the glass unreplaced and the grate outside undisturbed. Fleet White, during his basement search that morning, noticed the window open and alerted John, who then closed it without comment, an action later scrutinized as potentially tampering with the scene. Lou Smith, in his 1997 Intruder reconstruction, championed this as the entry route, demonstrating in videos how someone could remove the grate, slip through the narrow opening, measuring about 18 by 30 inches, and replace it without leaving marks, arguing the suitcase below served as a boost. However, cobwebs intact across the frame and lack of fresh footprints in the snow outside contradicted this, as CBI technicians in 1997 reported no disturbances in the dirt or debris around the well, suggesting no recent passage. John's story evolved. In a 1998 interview, he mentioned finding the window open during his own basement check that morning before JonBenét was discovered, closing it then, which conflicted with White's account of it being open later. This discrepancy fueled theories that the window was staged post-event to imply an intruder, with the old break conveniently left unrepaired to support the narrative. Patsy's statements added layers. She denied knowledge of the break-in, but recalled spiders in the basement, aligning with the undisturbed webs noted by investigators. The window's latch was functional from inside, easily manipulated, and no glove marks indicated forced entry, per the 1997 forensic report. Smith's theory, detailed in his 2000 resignation letter, posited an intruder hiding in the boiler room before using the window for escape, but overlooked the suitcase's contents belonging to John Andrew, not an outsider. John's access to the basement, he stored business files there, allowed him to arrange the scene, perhaps opening the window to create airflow or distraction. In a 2016 special, experts recreated the entry, finding it tight for an adult but possible, though the lack of scuff marks inside questioned its use. This setup diverted focus to an external threat. As John emphasized in interviews, while the family's alarm system being off that night, John's decision undermined security claims. The window's role in misdirection persists, with John's 2025 comments still alluding to basement vulnerabilities without addressing the staging suspicions. In the end, when every so-called piece of direct evidence fails to point to any intruder, and if those traces turn out to be nothing more than staged distractions, then we are left with one inescapable truth. We must turn our eyes toward the only person in the family who had no clear motive, no direct evidence against them, and the strongest alibi of all, John Ramsey. John Ramsey's primary motivation in handling the situation appears rooted in a desperate need to conceal sensitive mistreatment that had occurred over time, fearing that any formal examination would expose patterns of inappropriate behavior and lead to irreversible consequences for his reputation and freedom. This drive to hide such mistreatment shaped every decision, turning what might have been a tragic accident into a calculated series of actions designed to obscure the truth. The autopsy findings reveal injuries in private area, with medical experts noting inflammation and changes consistent with ongoing irritation. These injuries were not fresh but showed healing stages, indicating they predated the immediate events by weeks or months, a detail that would have prompted intense scrutiny if linked back to household dynamics. JonBenét's medical history further supported this, with records showing over 24 visits to the pediatrician in the 3 years leading up, many for persistent issues like bedwetting and infections in the sensitive area, conditions often associated with underlying distress. Patsy had taken her daughter to the doctor repeatedly for these problems, describing them as recurrent urinary tract concerns, but the frequency raised red flags among some observers who noted the child's age and the lack of clear external causes. Beyond the physical evidence, behavioral indicators pointed to a deeper unease within the home environment. JonBenet exhibited signs of anxiety, often clinging to her mother during social events and showing reluctance to be separated. Behaviors that friends and caregivers remarked upon as unusual for her outgoing pageant persona. Bedwetting persisted well beyond the typical age, occurring nightly and requiring protective undergarments, which Patsy mentioned in interviews as a frustrating but unexplained issue. These symptoms aligned with patterns seen in children experiencing sensitive mistreatment, where emotional turmoil manifests physically, yet the family dismissed them as minor childhood phases without seeking specialized intervention. John's role in this concealment becomes evident through his control over family narratives, ensuring that any discussions about these health concerns remain private and minimized. He portrayed the household as idyllic in public, emphasizing his business success and the children's achievements, but behind closed doors, the dynamics suggested otherwise, with John's frequent absences for work leaving gaps in oversight that could enable unchecked actions. One particularly unsettling anecdote comes from Linda Wilcox, the family's housekeeper from 1995 to mid-1996, who recounted an incident that highlighted John's peculiar habits. Wilcox described walking into the master bathroom one afternoon to find John placing a framed photograph of his deceased daughter Beth, lost in a car accident years earlier, inside the bathtub, positioning it carefully as if for a private ritual. Startled, she asked what he was doing, and John replied vaguely that it was just something he did sometimes, offering no further explanation before removing the photo. Wilcox later reflected on this in interviews, noting the oddity of using the bathtub for such a display, especially since the home had plenty of other spaces for mementos. This behavior struck her as intimate and isolated, raising questions about John's emotional state and how he processed grief, potentially linking to broader patterns of detachment or secrecy within his personal life. She also mentioned John's hands-off approach to daily childcare, delegating most tasks to Patsy or staff, which contrasted with his intense involvement in certain private moments. The Ramsey family's life, far from the polished image projected through pageants and social circles, was marked by underlying unhappiness that amplified tensions and vulnerabilities. Patsy's battle with ovarian cancer in the early 1990s left her physically drained and emotionally fragile, requiring extensive treatments that disrupted family routines and placed additional strain on the marriage. John, absorbed in his high-stakes career at Access Graphics, often traveled for weeks at a time, leaving Patsy to manage the household alone, fostering a sense of isolation that friends noticed in her quieter moments. Burke's behavioral issues added to the discord. He struggled with anger, evidenced by an earlier incident where he accidentally struck JonBenet with a golf club, requiring stitches, and other reports of him withdrawing into solitary play. The pressure of the pageant world weighed heavily on JonBenet, with long hours of rehearsals and competitions that Patsy pursued fervently. perhaps as a distraction from her own health struggles. But it created an uneven focus on the daughter over the son. Financial stresses loomed despite outward wealth, with John's company facing mergers and his bonus becoming a point of contention in later analyses. Socially, the family maintained a facade of perfection, holiday parties, charitable events, but insiders like the housekeeper observed arguments and a lack of warmth, with John appearing distant and Patsy overcompensating with elaborate decorations and activities. This unhappiness manifested in small ways, like JonBenét's reluctance to sleep alone or her frequent calls for attention, hinting at an environment where sensitive mistreatment could thrive unchecked amid the chaos. These indicators collectively paint a picture of a man whose actions were fueled by self-preservation, weaving a web of denial around the family's core dysfunctions. The repeated doctor visits for genital-related concerns, often attributed to innocuous causes like bubble baths or accidents, belied a deeper pattern that John's motivation sought to bury. Patsy's focus on recovery left gaps in vigilance, while John's professional demands provided alibis for detachment. The housekeeper's observations of strained interactions, including John's curt dismissals of domestic matters, highlighted the emotional void. JonBenét's clinginess at events, where she sought constant reassurance, contrasted sharply with her staged confidence, suggesting an underlying insecurity rooted in home life. Burke's episodes, like the golf club swing labeled an accident, pointed to unresolved sibling tensions exacerbated by parental favoritism. In this atmosphere, John's need to hide sensitive mistreatment became paramount, transforming personal fears into manipulative strategies that preserved his facade at all costs. The family's social calendar, filled with appearances that masked internal strife, amplified the isolation. Patsy's pageant involvement, while a source of pride, consumed her energy, leaving little for addressing subtle red flags like JonBenét's persistent discomfort. John's business trips, often extending to international deals, meant prolonged absences that could coincide with unchecked behaviors. The bathtub ritual with Beth's photo, as Wilcox described, occurred during one such period when Patsy was away, revealing John's solitary tendencies that veered into the unusual. This incident, coupled with his minimal engagement in daily parenting, suggested a compartmentalized life where sensitive matters remained hidden. The chronic nature of the genital injuries, with healing tissues indicating repetition, aligned with opportunities during these absences, underscoring the motivation to prevent any probe that might connect the dots. Amid the unhappiness, small anecdotes from staff painted a fuller picture. Wilcox, noting John's preference for privacy in his study, away from the children's noise, or Patsy's occasional breakdowns over minor setbacks. Burke's withdrawal into video games and toys reflected a child navigating neglect, while JonBenét's overachievement in pageants masked her vulnerabilities. The motivation to conceal sensitive mistreatment thus intertwined with the family's broader discontent, where outward success hid internal fractures, driving John to extreme measures to maintain control. The signs, from medical records to behavioral cues, formed an undeniable mosaic that his actions aimed to shatter before exposure. For the theory of how everything happened, the hypothesis that Burke Ramsey accidentally injured his sister JonBenét begins with the family's return home after a social gathering, where the children, still energized from the evening, stayed up later than usual. Burke, at 9 years old, ventured downstairs to the kitchen for a snack, helping himself to a bowl of pineapple chunks mixed with milk, a treat he enjoyed and that was readily available in the refrigerator. JonBenét, hearing her brother or simply awake and curious, joined him shortly after, sharing in the impromptu late-night treat. The two siblings, close in age but with differing personalities, Burke more introverted and focused on his interests, JonBenét outgoing and playful, engaged in typical sibling banter that escalated into a minor dispute. Perhaps it centered on the snack itself or shifted to one of Burke's toys, but in a moment of frustration, Burke grabbed a nearby object, like the heavy Maglite flashlight often kept in the kitchen for emergencies, and swung it impulsively. The blow landed on JonBenét's head, causing her to collapse unconscious, a tragic accident born from a child's lack of foresight rather than malice. Burke, startled and scared, attempted to rouse her, poking gently with whatever was at hand. But when she didn't respond, he rushed upstairs to alert his parents, his voice trembling as he explained that something bad had happened to his sister. Patsy Ramsey, still awake and packing for an upcoming trip, was the first to hear Burke's urgent call and hurried downstairs with him. Her initial reaction one of panic upon seeing JonBenet unresponsive on the floor. She immediately summoned John, who joined them moments later, assessing the situation with his characteristic composure amid the chaos. John, as the family patriarch and a successful businessman accustomed to high-pressure decisions, quickly realized the gravity of the moment. He instructed Burke to return to his room and stay there, assuring the boy that everything would be handled and emphasizing the need for him to remain quiet until told otherwise. With Burke out of the way, John turned his attention to JonBenét, checking for signs of recovery, but finding none that alleviated his growing concern. At this point, John's role shifted from reactive parent to strategic planner. He recognized that calling for medical help would trigger an official investigation, including detailed examinations that could uncover unrelated family matters he preferred to keep private. Drawing on his analytical mindset, John decided to intervene directly, taking steps to ensure the incident appeared as something other than a simple accident, all while maintaining control over the narrative to protect his own interests. As Patsy continued to fret, torn between her maternal instincts and the shock of the scene, John calmly explained his perspective. Burke's actions, though unintentional, could lead to severe repercussions for the entire family if authorities became involved. He painted a vivid picture of potential outcomes: Burke being removed from the home, labeled as troubled, and facing lifelong stigma, the family's public image shattered amid media scrutiny, and their comfortable life upended by legal battles. John positioned himself as the protector, insisting that only by working together could they safeguard Burke and preserve their unity. Patsy, overwhelmed and trusting her husband's judgment in crisis, gradually acquiesced, her fear for her son's future overriding her initial impulse to seek outside help. John outlined a plan where they would reframe the event to shift focus away from the household, assigning Patsy tasks that played to her strengths, such as composing a detailed message to set the stage for an alternative explanation. He guided her through the process, suggesting key elements to include while allowing her personal style to emerge, ensuring her involvement was deep enough to bind her to the decisions. Burke, meanwhile, remained in his room as instructed, likely confused and anxious but obedient. His simple understanding of the situation limited to knowing he had hurt his sister accidentally, and that his parents were handling it. John's assurance to him that no one would blame him and everything would be fine helped keep the boy calm, reinforcing the boy's natural tendency to withdraw during stress. As the night progressed, John continued to direct the sequence, making sure Patsy followed through on her assigned role while he managed other aspects to align with his vision. Patsy's emotional state, fluctuating between tears and determination, reflected her internal conflict, but John's steady demeanor and repeated emphasis on protecting Burke kept her aligned. He reminded her of past family challenges they had overcome together, framing this as another test of their resilience, which further solidified her cooperation. With each step, John reinforced the idea that deviation from the plan would endanger Burke, most of all using the boy's innocence and their shared love for him as the ultimate leverage. The flashlight, now set aside on the kitchen counter, served as a silent reminder of the accidental trigger, but John ensured it remained in place, its presence unremarkable yet pivotal in the unfolding events. Patsy's contributions, infused with her unique touch from years of writing holiday letters and notes, added layers that John approved, knowing they would draw attention in ways that supported his goals. Burke's brief involvement ended with him back in bed, pretending to sleep as dawn approached, his alibi simplified to match the family's unified front. John's orchestration extended to minor details, like positioning items to suggest external interference, all while keeping Patsy focused on the immediate tasks. Her trust in him, built over years of marriage and shared successes, made her a willing participant, even as doubts flickered in her mind. The sequence unfolded methodically. Burke's accident, the alert to parents, John's assessment and decision to intervene, Patsy's reluctant agreement under the weight of threats to their son's future, and the collaborative efforts that followed. As Patsy carried out her part, drawing from familiar household resources, John monitored closely, offering adjustments to refine the approach. He emphasized the need for discretion, warning that any slip could unravel everything and lead to Burke's removal from their care. This emotional pressure, combined with Patsy's natural protectiveness as a mother, locked her into the plan, her actions now intertwined with John's directives. Burke, isolated in his room, represented the stake they were supposedly protecting, his earlier mistake now leveraged as the catalyst for unity. John's calm facade masked his calculations, ensuring that Patsy's visible distress would contrast with his composure, further distancing him from direct involvement. The pineapple bowl, left untouched on the table, hinted at the children's innocent late-night activity, but John saw no need to disturb it, allowing it to remain as a subtle clue that could be explained away if questioned. Patsy's role grew as John delegated, her familiarity with the home's layout making her efficient in gathering materials. She questioned little, driven by the fear John had instilled, that without their combined efforts, Burke's life would be forever altered, marked by institutionalization or public shame. John's reminders of their family's public standing, with its charitable involvements and social ties, amplified the stakes, portraying exposure as a total downfall. Burke's obedience in staying put allowed the adults to proceed uninterrupted, his youth shielding him from the full implications. The flashlight's relocation to the counter, perhaps by John himself, served as a neutral element. Its utility in the accident now repurposed in the broader scheme. Throughout, John's influence loomed large, his business Hans management applied to this personal dilemma. Patsy's cooperation, secured through appeals to maternal instinct and family loyalty, ensured the plan's execution, with each action building on the last. The sequence, starting with Burke's impulsive act, escalating to parental intervention, and evolving into a coordinated response, highlighted John's pivotal role in transforming an accident into a protected secret. Patsy's growing involvement, from initial shock to active participation, stemmed from the persistent narrative that only unity could save Burke from the consequences of his mistake. John's strategic pauses, allowing Patsy to process while he refined details, maintained momentum without overwhelming her further. Burke's isolation continued, his brief emergence during a later call quickly curtailed with instructions to return to bed, reinforcing the adult's control. Patsy's tasks, assigned with precision, kept her engaged, her trust in John's leadership unwavering despite the strain. The pineapple remnants, overlooked in the haste, stood as a testament to the drink's innocent prelude, now overshadowed by the adult's decisions. John's calm directives, contrasting Patsy's anxiety, underscored his dominance in the unfolding events, ensuring that the response aligned with his protective priorities. The family's dynamics, with John's authority at the helm, facilitated this shift, turning a sibling mishap into a guarded family matter. Patsy's eventual full commitment, born from fear for Burke's welfare, solidified the partnership, with John's guidance steering every step. The flashlight, now a silent witness on the counter, symbolized the accident's origin, its presence unaltered as the plan progressed. Burke's compliance, rooted in parental authority, allowed the focus to remain on the adult's coordination, his role reduced to the initial catalyst. As the hours ticked by, John's play with Patsy's input adding authenticity to the elements she handled. Her emotional investment in protecting Burke made her a reliable ally, even as John's underlying motives remained his own. The sequence of events, from the snack and dispute to the injury, alert, and response, illustrated how a moment of childish impulsivity spiraled under John's direction. Patsy's role, evolving from bystander to participant, was cemented by John's persistent framing of the stakes, emphasizing Burke's vulnerability. The household items involved, like the flashlight, blended seamlessly into the narrative, their everyday nature masking the accident's simplicity. Burke's retreat to his room, as instructed, preserved his detachment, allowing the parents to manage the fallout. John's composure, a stark contrast to Patsy's distress, enabled him to orchestrate without falter, his decisions driven by a need to safeguard secrets beyond the immediate incident. Patsy's cooperation, fueled by maternal duty, ensured the plan's continuity, with each action reinforcing the collective effort to shield their son. In reflecting on the layers of evidence we've explored, this case serves as a stark reminder of how fragmented clues can profoundly shape the trajectory of an investigation, often leading it astray when not subjected to rigorous scrutiny. What began as seemingly mysterious items, a misplaced backpack, an unidentified hair, a lingering palm print, unraveled into elements tied closely to the family, yet their initial presentation created a web of diversions that muddled the truth for decades. The ransom note, with its dramatic flair and personal touches, exemplifies how a single document can redirect focus toward elaborate theories of outsiders or internal suspects, while Windows left ajar at intrusion without supporting traces. These pieces, when isolated, fueled narratives that protected certain perspectives, but a closer examination revealed inconsistencies, items belonging to family members, forensic matches overlooked or downplayed, and staging that pointed in multiple directions without converging on clarity. The lesson here is clear: evidence, when splintered and not cross-verified, becomes a tool for manipulation, allowing stories to be crafted that serve agendas rather than justice. Consider how such fragmentation influences public perception and legal outcomes. In high-profile scenarios, media amplification turns ambiguous details into sensational headlines, pressuring investigators to chase leads that evaporate under deeper analysis. The backpack and rope, once touted as intruder artifacts, traced back to a son's hiking gear, yet their placement invited suspicion elsewhere. Similarly, the palm print, resolved over 2 decades ago, lingered as unidentified in recent retellings, illustrating how outdated or selective facts can perpetuate myths. This division of evidence, some elevated as bombshells, others dismissed, creates echo chambers where confirmation bias thrives, delaying resolutions and eroding trust in the process. Without meticulous research, like revisiting autopsy reports or handwriting analysis, these elements can be weaponized to pivot narratives, shielding those who benefit from the confusion while victims' stories fade into speculation. Ultimately, this pattern underscores the vulnerability of justice systems to misdirection. When clues are not holistically investigated through timelines, forensics, and psychological profiles, they risk being co-opted to construct alternate realities. The ransom note's cinematic phrases, for instance, diverted attention to fictional kidnappers, while open windows suggested entry points without footprints or disturbances to corroborate them. Such tactics highlight how intentional or unintentional gaps in inquiry allow evidence to be repurposed, turning investigations into mazes. As we dissect these elements, it becomes evident that thorough, unbiased probing is essential to pierce through the fog, ensuring that fragments coalesce into truth rather than illusion. What if the real key to unlocking this enduring mystery lies not in the evidence we see, but in questioning who benefits most from keeping it divided?